What is Punisher's role in Spider-Man: Brand New Day? Frank Castle explained. Warning! This video contains major spoilers for Spider-Man: Brand New Day. We'll be discussing Frank Castle's role, key story moments, and how his actions shape Peter Parker's journey throughout the movie. Now, let's begin. When Marvel announced that Jon Bernthal's Punisher would appear in Spider-Man: Brand New Day, fans immediately started asking the same question. Would Frank Castle simply make a cameo? Would he become the movie's villain? Or would Spider-Man and the Punisher finally fight side by side? The answer is much more interesting than anyone expected. Frank Castle isn't the main villain. He's not Peter Parker's partner, and he's definitely not there just for fan service. Instead, Punisher becomes the emotional opposite of Spider-Man. Throughout the movie, Frank constantly forces Peter to question what it truly means to be a hero. In many ways, Brand New Day isn't just Spider-Man versus the villains. It's Spider-Man versus the future he could become. And that future looks a lot like Frank Castle. Let's explain why Marvel chose the Punisher. At first glance, Spider-Man and the Punisher seem like complete opposites. Spider-Man believes every life has value. The Punisher believes some criminals have already lost the right to a second chance. Spider-Man arrests criminals. Punisher eliminates them. Yet comic book fans know these characters have shared history. Frank Castle actually made his comic book debut in The Amazing Spider-Man Has Hone Twonin in 1974 before becoming one of Marvel's most famous anti-heroes. So bringing Frank into Peter's world isn't random. It's a return to Spider-Man's comic roots. Marvel Studios wanted Brand New Day to tell a grounded New York story after years of multiverse adventures. That made the Punisher the perfect character to challenge Peter's beliefs. Peter meets a very different kind of hero. When the movie begins, Peter Parker has already lost everything. Nobody remembers him after Doctor Strange's spell. He's living alone, making his own Spider-Man suit, protecting New York without help from the Avengers. While investigating a violent criminal conspiracy, Peter discovers someone else is hunting the same organization, Frank Castle. Unlike Spider-Man, Frank doesn't care about collecting evidence or waiting for the police. His mission is simple: find criminals, end the threat, move on. Their first meeting immediately creates conflict because Peter realizes Frank's methods cross a line he can never accept. Spider-Man wants justice. Punisher wants finality. Spider-Man and Punisher constantly clash. One of the movie's strongest themes is that Peter and Frank are fighting the same war but using completely different weapons. During several confrontations, Peter repeatedly stops Frank from killing dangerous criminals. Frank becomes frustrated. From his perspective, Peter keeps allowing violent criminals to survive and eventually hurt more innocent people. Frank argues that mercy often creates more victims. Peter argues that giving up on people is exactly how heroes become monsters. Neither man convinces the other. Instead, every conversation becomes a philosophical debate about justice. Critics have praised these scenes because they focus less on superhero spectacle and more on character conflict. Frank sees himself in Peter. Perhaps the biggest surprise in the movie is that Frank Castle slowly begins caring about Peter, not in an emotional or sentimental way, but because he recognizes something dangerous. He sees a young man burying his grief exactly the way Frank once did. Jon Bernthal revealed that Frank actually becomes an unusual mentor to Peter. Instead of encouraging Spider-Man to become darker, Frank warns him against it. At one point, Frank notices Peter pushing MJ away and shutting himself off emotionally. Frank tells him not to make the same mistake. In Bernthal's own words, Frank basically says, "Don't do the whole dark thing. I do that. It's not fun." It's one of the most unexpected moments in the movie, because the Punisher, one of Marvel's darkest characters, is actually trying to stop Peter from becoming like him. Why Peter needs Frank Castle. After No Way Home, Peter is emotionally broken. He has no family, no best friend, no girlfriend. No one remembers his real identity. For the first time since becoming Spider-Man, Peter has absolutely no emotional support. That loneliness slowly begins changing him. Marvel has described this version of Peter as more vulnerable and isolated than ever before. According to Jon Bernthal, Frank fits naturally into the story because Peter has entered a much darker period of his life. The Punisher doesn't become lighter. Spider-Man becomes heavier. That's why their scenes work so well together. They eventually fight together. Although they spend much of the film arguing, circumstances eventually force Spider-Man and the Punisher to work together. The partnership is uncomfortable from the very beginning. Peter swings into danger trying to rescue civilians. Frank charges straight toward the people causing it. Spider-Man uses webs to disable enemies. Punisher relies on military tactics and overwhelming force. The contrast creates some of the film's most memorable action scenes. Instead of copying each other's fighting styles, both heroes remain completely true to who they are. Spider-Man refuses to kill. Punisher refuses to compromise. That difference never disappears. And that's exactly why their partnership feels believable. The moral lesson of the movie. Many viewers expected Punisher to exist purely for action. Instead, he becomes one of the movie's biggest emotional influences. Frank represents everything Peter could become if he allowed grief to replace hope. Both men have suffered unimaginable loss. Both have watched loved ones die. Both spend every night fighting dangerous criminals. But one still believes people deserve another chance. The other stopped believing that long ago. Throughout the movie, Peter repeatedly chooses compassion over revenge. Those choices ultimately define him as Spider-Man. Frank may not agree with Peter's decisions, but by the end of the story, he clearly respects the young hero's determination to hold on to his humanity. Why critics love their dynamic. Early reviews consistently praise the chemistry between Tom Holland and Jon Bernthal. Many critics describe their relationship as one of the film's highlights because it adds emotional weight without overshadowing Spider-Man's own story. Rather than turning Punisher into comic relief or dramatically changing his personality, Marvel keeps Frank recognizable while allowing him to challenge Peter in meaningful ways. Reviewers have also noted that the film avoids making either character completely right or completely wrong. Instead, audiences are left to consider both philosophies before deciding which vision of justice they believe in. What Punisher's role means for the MCU. Frank Castle's appearance could have important consequences beyond Brand New Day. For years, fans wondered whether Marvel Studios could successfully integrate the Punisher into the family-friendly MCU without losing what makes him unique. Jon Bernthal admitted he had the same concern. He said he was protective of the character and wanted to ensure Frank remained authentic instead of becoming a watered-down version of the Punisher. Based on early reactions, many fans believe Marvel found that balance. Frank remains ruthless. He remains uncompromising. But instead of dominating the movie, he strengthens Peter Parker's story by forcing Spider-Man to defend the values that make him different. If this positive response continues, there's every chance Frank Castle will return for future street-level MCU stories, alongside heroes like Spider-Man and Daredevil. Final thoughts. So, what is the Punisher's role in Spider-Man Brand New Day? He's much more than a guest appearance. He's Peter Parker's greatest moral challenge. Frank Castle forces Spider-Man to ask difficult questions about justice, revenge, responsibility, and mercy. He represents the path Peter could take if he ever allowed pain to destroy his compassion. By the end of the film, neither man changes the other's beliefs, but both leave with a deeper respect for one another. Spider-Man proves that true strength comes from refusing to abandon hope. The Punisher proves that even the darkest heroes can recognize goodness when they see it. And together, they create one of the most compelling relationships in Spider-Man, Brand New Day. One that reminds us exactly why Peter Parker remains one of Marvel's greatest heroes. What do you think? Did you enjoy seeing Spider-Man and the Punisher share the screen? Or do you think Frank Castle deserves an even bigger role in future Marvel movies? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Spider-Man, Marvel, Daredevil, Punisher, ending explained videos, hidden details, and entertainment.